You just got your paycheck. You look at the number and you think about how many hours you work to earn it. 40 hours a week for 2 weeks, 80 hours total. Your job pays $30 an hour, so you should have made $2,400 before taxes, right? But when you look at your actual paycheck, after taxes and Social Security and Medicare and health insurance and all the other deductions, you're left with about $1,600. That's a pretty big chunk gone just to taxes and deductions. But here's what really gets me. Most people look at that $1,600 and they think that's how much their labor is actually worth. They think that's the real value of the 40 or 80 hours they spent working. But that's not even close to the real story. The actual value of your labor is probably way higher than you think. And the reason you're only taking home a fraction of what you actually earn is because of a whole system of hidden costs and deductions that are stealing from you without you even realizing it. My name is Clarence, and I've spent way too much time thinking about how work actually works and how much money you're really making versus how much you think you're making. Don't forget, like this video and subscribe to the channel. See, there's this mythology out there that says if you make $30 an hour, then you're making $30 an hour. Your employer pays you $30 an hour, you work the hours, and you get paid. Simple math, right? Wrong. The reality is way more complicated than that. There are costs associated with your job that come out of your paycheck, costs that come out of your employer's budget that you never see, and opportunity costs that you never think about. And when you add all of these together, the actual value of your labor versus the amount of money that actually ends up in your pocket is shockingly different. Understanding this gap is absolutely critical if you ever want to stop being poor and start building real wealth. Let's start with the obvious part, which is the direct deductions from your paycheck. When you make $30 an hour and you work 40 hours a week, your gross pay is $1,200. But that's not what you take home. From that $1,200, you've got federal income tax. Depending on your tax bracket, that could be anywhere from 10 to 22% of your gross pay. So right there, you're losing somewhere between $120 and $260. Then you've got state income tax, which varies depending on where you live. If you live in a state with no income tax, great, you're not losing anything there. But if you live in a state with income tax, you could be losing another 3 to 5% of your gross pay. Then you've got Social Security tax, which is 6.2% of your gross pay. That's $74 right there. Then you've got Medicare tax, which is 1.45%. That's another $17. So far, you've lost about $180 to $300 just in these mandatory deductions. That brings you down to about $900 to $1,000 from your original $1,200 paycheck. But it doesn't stop there. If you've got health insurance through your employer, there's a monthly premium that comes out of your paycheck. Depending on the type of plan and where you live, that could be anywhere from $200 to $500 per month. Let's say it's $300 per month. That means it's about $75 per week coming out of your paycheck. Now you're down to about $800 to $900 per week take-home pay. But wait, there's more. Some employers also deduct contributions to retirement plans, like 401ks. If you're contributing to a 401k, that money comes out of your paycheck before taxes, which is good in the long run because it reduces your taxable income, but it means less money in your pocket right now. Let's say you're contributing 5% of your gross pay to your 401k. That's $60 per week. Now you're down to about $740 to $840 per week. So let's do the math here. You made $1,200 gross for the week. After taxes, Social Security, Medicare, health insurance, and 401k contributions, you're taking home somewhere between $740 and $840 per week. That's a reduction of about 30 to 40% from your gross pay. You went from making $30 an hour to effectively making about $18 to $20 an hour in actual take-home pay. That's already a significant gap between what you think you're making and what you're actually making. But this is just the beginning. Now let's talk about the costs that aren't directly deducted from your paycheck, but that you still have to pay because you have a job. The biggest one is transportation. If you're driving to work, you've got gas, maintenance, insurance, and eventually the cost of replacing your car. The average American spends about $9,000 per year on transportation. If you're working 50 weeks a year, that's 40 hours per week, that's 2,000 hours of work per year. $9,000 divided by 2,000 hours is $4.50 per hour. So right there, your job is actually costing you $4.50 per hour just in transportation costs. Now you're down to about $13.50 to $15.50 per hour. But wait, there's more. You need work clothes. You need to look professional at your job. You can't wear pajamas. You need to buy clothes specifically for work, and those clothes wear out faster because you're wearing them more frequently. Let's say you spend $500 per year on work clothes. That's 25 cents per hour. You need to eat. You probably eat lunch at work or near your work. Even if you bring your lunch from home, there's still a cost associated with that food. Let's say you spend $10 per day on food while you're at work. That's $50 per week, $2,000 per year. $2,000 divided by 2,000 hours is $1 per hour. Now you're down to about $12.50 to $14.50 per hour. You might need childcare while you're working. If you've got kids and you're paying for daycare or after-school care while you're at work, that could be $1,000 per month or more. Let's say it's $1,000 per month. That's $12,000 per year. $12,000 divided by 2,000 hours is $6 per hour. Now you're down to about $6.50 to $8.50 per hour. You might have other work-related expenses. Maybe you need a professional license, and you have to pay for continuing education to maintain that license. Maybe you need special equipment or tools. Maybe you need to pay for professional development or training to stay competitive in your field. These costs add up. And then there's the opportunity cost, which is the most insidious cost of all, because most people never even think about it. When you're working a job, you're trading your time for money. But you're trading your time for something else, too. You're trading your time for stress, for dealing with difficult managers or coworkers, for dealing with the politics of the workplace, for worrying about whether you're going to get laid off, for missing time with your family. You're trading your youth and your energy for a paycheck, and the opportunity cost of that is enormous. If you spent that time instead on building a side business or developing skills that could increase your income, or investing in assets that could create passive income, you could potentially be making way more money than you're making from your job. But you can't do that while you're working full-time, because you don't have the time and energy. Let me paint you a picture of what the real math looks like when you account for all of these costs. You're making $30 an hour. After direct deductions like taxes, Social Security, Medicare, health insurance, and retirement contributions, you're taking home about $18 to $20 an hour. Then you subtract transportation costs of $4.50 per hour. You subtract food costs of $1 per hour. You subtract work clothes of 25 cents per hour. You subtract childcare of $6 per hour if you have kids. That brings you down to about $6 to $8 per hour in actual net benefit from your job after accounting for all the direct costs. And that's not even accounting for the opportunity cost of not being able to pursue other income-generating activities because you're working full-time. Now, some of you might be thinking that this math is too harsh or that I'm being unfair. You might be thinking that not everyone has all of these costs. You're right. Some people don't have kids, so they don't have childcare costs. Some people live close to their job and don't have huge transportation costs. Some people have jobs that provide really good health insurance, so the premium isn't that high. But even if you eliminate some of these costs, the fundamental reality remains the same. The amount of money you actually get to keep from your job is a fraction of what your employer is paying for your labor. And the gap between the two is massive. And that gap is the real scam. Here's what's really infuriating about this. Your employer is paying $30 per hour for your labor. That's their cost. They're writing you a check for $30 per hour. But you're only taking home $6 to $8 per hour after accounting for all the costs associated with working that job. Where's the rest of the money going? Well, some of it is going to the government in taxes. Some of it is going to your health insurance company. Some of it is going to the transportation industry, the food industry, the childcare industry. But the fundamental point is that the actual value you're getting from your job is a tiny fraction of what your employer is paying for your labor. And you've been conditioned to think this is normal. You've been conditioned to think that this is just how work works. But it's not how work has to work. And understanding this gap is the key to actually building wealth. The reason this is such a scam is that most people never stop to do this calculation. They look at their job and they think about the hourly rate, $30 an hour. That sounds pretty good. But they never think about all the hidden costs that come along with that job. They never calculate the actual net value of their labor after accounting for all the costs. And if they did, they would probably realize that they're being sold a bill of goods. They're working a job that pays them $30 an hour, but they're only actually benefiting from about $6 to $8 of that. The other $22 to $24 is being extracted by various systems and institutions that benefit from your labor. Now, here's the thing that's really important to understand. This doesn't mean you should quit your job tomorrow. It doesn't mean that having a job is always a bad idea. But it does mean that you should understand the actual value of your labor and the actual benefit you're getting from your job. And it means that you should be thinking strategically about how to maximize the actual value you're getting from your job while minimizing the costs associated with it. It also means that you should be thinking about alternative ways to earn income that don't have all of these hidden costs built in. For example, if you start a side business, you can deduct business expenses directly. Your transportation costs to work on your business can be deducted. Your equipment can be deducted. Your training and development can be deducted. So while you might not be earning as much per hour on your side business as you are at your job, the actual net benefit to you, after accounting for deductions, could actually be higher. You could be earning $15 an hour on a side business and actually keeping more of it than you're keeping from your $30 an hour job, because you have more control over the costs and you can deduct those costs. Another way to think about this is in terms of how much time you actually need to work at your job to achieve your financial goals. If the actual net benefit of your job is $6 to $8 an hour, then you need to work a lot more hours to achieve your financial goals than you thought. If you want to save $20,000 per year, and you're only actually getting $6 to $8 per hour of net benefit from your job, then you need to work 2,500 to 3,300 hours per year just to save that money. That's about 50 to 60 hours per week for 50 weeks per year. That's a lot of hours. But if you could find ways to increase the actual net benefit of your work, either by reducing the costs associated with your job or by finding ways to earn income that have lower costs built in, then you could achieve your financial goals in less time. This is why people in their 40s and 50s need to really think hard about this issue. You've probably been working at jobs for 20 or 30 years. You've been trading your time and your energy for a paycheck, and you've probably never stopped to calculate the actual value of that trade. You've probably accepted it as normal and just assumed that this is how the world works. But the world is changing. The economy is changing. The costs associated with work are changing. And at some point, you have to stop and ask yourself whether the trade you're making is actually worth it. Is it worth trading your time and your energy and your youth for $6 to $8 an hour of actual net benefit? Or should you be thinking about alternative ways to structure your work life so that you're getting more value from your time? One of the most important things you can do is to reduce the costs associated with your job. If you can move closer to your work and reduce your transportation costs, that's a significant increase in the actual value of your job. If you can find a job that offers better health insurance or allows you to opt out of health insurance and use a different plan, that could reduce your costs. If you can find a job that allows you to work from home, you can reduce your transportation costs and potentially reduce your childcare costs if you have kids. If you can find a job that allows you to work flexible hours or part-time, you might be able to combine it with a side business that has lower costs and higher actual net benefit. Another important thing you can do is to think about your career in terms of the actual net value of your labor over time, not just the hourly rate. A job that pays $30 an hour, but requires you to commute 2 hours per day and costs you a lot in transportation and food and other work-related expenses, might actually be worth less in net value than a job that pays $20 an hour, but is right next to your home and has minimal work-related expenses. When you do the full accounting, the second job might actually be worth more to you because you're keeping more of the actual value. The most important thing you can do, though, is to stop thinking of your job as your only source of income. Your job is limited. You can only work so many hours per week. There are only so many hours in the day. Once you've used up those hours working your job, that's it. You can't create more hours. But you can create other sources of income that have different cost structures and different time requirements. You can start a side business. You can build an online course. You can invest in real estate. You can create content on YouTube or other platforms. These alternative income sources might not pay as much per hour as your job, but if they have lower costs associated with them, the actual net benefit could be much higher. And here's the thing that should really get you thinking. Most of the wealthy people in the world didn't get wealthy by working a job and trading their time for an hourly wage. They got wealthy by creating alternative sources of income that don't have the same cost structure as a traditional job. They built businesses. They created products. They invested in assets. They created content. They did things that generated income with much lower associated costs than a traditional job. And once you understand the actual scam of a traditional job, once you understand that the actual net value of your labor is a fraction of what your employer is paying for it, you start to understand why this is the case. So here's what I want you to do. First, calculate the actual net value of your job. Take your hourly rate and subtract all the direct deductions from your paycheck. Then subtract all the costs associated with working that job: transportation, food, work clothes, childcare, professional development, whatever it is. Then think about the opportunity cost of not being able to pursue other activities that might generate income or create value. When you do this calculation, you're probably going to realize that the actual net value of your job is much lower than you thought. Second, think about ways you could reduce the costs associated with your job. Could you move closer to your work? Could you find a different job with lower work-related costs? Could you negotiate for flexible hours or the ability to work from home? Third, think about alternative ways to earn income that might have lower costs associated with them. Could you start a side business? Could you freelance in your field? Could you create content or products that generate passive income? Once you start thinking about this stuff, you'll realize that there are actually a lot of options available to you, if you're willing to be strategic and creative about it. The fundamental truth is that a traditional job with an hourly wage is a scam, in the sense that you're trading way more value than you're receiving. You're trading your time, your energy, your youth, your flexibility, your freedom, and all of the associated costs that come with being an employee. And in exchange, you're getting a paycheck that's been whittled down by taxes, deductions, and work-related costs to a fraction of what your employer is actually paying for your labor. Once you understand this, once you really internalize this, you can start making strategic decisions about your career and your finances that actually put you ahead instead of keeping you stuck on the hamster wheel forever. That was your friend Clarence Capital. Don't forget, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Check out the next video. Take care of yourself, your finances, and most importantly, your time. Good luck.